The universe feels too perfect. Not just vast, but suspiciously precise, as if tailored to cradle life. The more we observe, the more that perfection haunts us. It's not the kind of flawlessness born of chaos settling into order. It's a meticulous harmony, a script rehearsed long before there were eyes to read it. From the gravitational pull that coaxes stars into being, to the delicate balance that keeps atoms from dissolving into nothingness, every rule of the cosmos seems written not just for survival, but for wonder. And not just any wonder. Human wonder. In a sea of randomness, the Earth spins with uncanny precision. The constants of physics, those silent rulers of reality, are set with the elegance of a master composer, tuning each string before the symphony begins. Scientists and philosophers alike have wondered, why does the universe feel too perfect for chance alone? Why does it hum at just the right frequency to make galaxies, consciousness, and love possible? It could have been otherwise. That phrase, whispered, in lectures and scrawled into cosmology papers, carries the weight of everything. If the universe had cooled a fraction faster, matter would never have clumped together. If the strength of gravity had been even slightly off, stars would never have formed. Or they would have collapsed too quickly for planets to emerge. We shouldn't be here. Not in this form. Not in a cosmos that appears, not accidental, but intentional. This is no ordinary cosmos. It's what some call a fine-tuned universe, calibrated beyond comprehension. We exist not just on a knife's edge, but on a razor so thin it makes our very presence feel impossible. Hydrogen fuses just right. Dark energy expands just fast enough. Even the electromagnetic force, so humble, so overlooked, behaves with the finesse of a craftsman who knew the stakes. And yet, amid this perfection, a deeper mystery blooms. Why us? Why now? In a void that could have been eternal silence, there is song. In equations that could have described barren decay, there is birth and light and time. Is it arrogance to think the universe made room for us? Or humility to suspect we are part of something vast, deliberate, and ancient beyond? Words? Look up. The night sky is not indifferent. It waits, radiant, persistent, whispering stories in photon streams, stories of fusion and formation, of stars born, bloated, and broken, of carbon forged in death, of the long, improbable road that leads from supernovae to Shakespeare, from quantum fields to questions. We live in a universe that almost didn't exist. Not like this. Not with this balance. The cosmological constants, finely tuned to a degree that makes randomness seem absurd, dare us to explain them. And in that dare lies the echo of purpose. Not a religious one, perhaps. Not the hand of a deity in the clouds, but a kind of purpose embedded in the numbers. A purpose not of intent, but of inevitability. What does it mean, then, that life can emerge only under such exquisite conditions? What does it mean that consciousness, that rare flicker of self-awareness, blooms in only one kind of cosmos, the kind that feels too perfect to be real? Could it be that we find ourselves here because there is nowhere else to be? Or does our very presence suggest that reality favors observers? This is the paradox that shatters simplicity. The anthropic principle tells us that, of course, we find ourselves in a universe suitable for life, because only in such a universe could we exist to ask the question. But that explanation, neat as it is, feels like dodging something deeper. It skirts the awe. It smothers the poetry. Because here's the truth. The more we understand, the more improbable it all seems. The more we probe the laws of physics, the more they resemble a code, not just functional, but elegant. A language written not just to sustain, but to astonish. Why does the universe feel too perfect? Because it wears perfection like a mask, revealing just enough to tempt us, and just little enough to stay hidden. We are not drifting through a meaningless expanse. We are navigating a story, and perhaps, just perhaps, we are part of that story's purpose. The stars do not merely burn, they speak. The void does not simply stretch, it listens. And the laws do not just govern, they beckon. Even entropy, the great undoer, moves with choreography. Galaxies collide in slow ballets. Time bends in the presence of mass. Light delays its journey across curves in space-time. Nothing is out of place. Even chaos follows form. But perfection demands a cost. If the universe is fine-tuned, then why the suffering? Why the extinction, the silence, the void between stars where no life will ever stir? Why the lonely corners where galaxies collapse into black holes, swallowing light and time alike? If this is a design, it is a cruel one, or a masterpiece beyond morality, and still we feel it. The tension between terror and beauty, between precision and randomness, between silence and song. The universe is a cathedral of contradiction, its pillars built from paradox. We marvel not just because it exists, but because it shouldn't. Perhaps, then, the greatest mystery is not that we are here, but that we are able to notice how strange that is. Consciousness may not be a fluke, but the final layer of the universe's design, the mirror in which it sees itself. So we ask again, why does the universe feel too perfect? Because every photon, every equation, every rhythm of birth and death echoes with symmetry. Because the speed of light is not arbitrary. Because the strength of gravity is not guessed. Because the rules that shape everything, from quarks to quasars, trace patterns more intricate than chance should allow. Because life arose not in defiance of the odds, but in harmony with them. There are those who say the multiverse answers it all, that in a limitless number of universes, one would eventually stumble into being just right. And maybe they're right. Maybe we are the lottery winners in a cosmic casino. But even that idea, that infinity can explain precision, feels like sleight of hand, an attempt to explain away the awe rather than face it. For awe is dangerous. It leads to questions science cannot yet answer. It stirs something ancient in us, something that once looked at fire and saw a god, something that looks at galaxies and sees a message, a longing, a riddle. So let the mystery stand. Let the perfection haunt. Let it sharpen our tools, our theories, our dreams. For in chasing the question, we become more than passengers in the cosmos. We become its voice. To understand why the universe feels too perfect, we must go back from the moment humans first looked up and wondered. The stars were never just distant fires. They were symbols, stories, signs. In the beginning, before numbers ruled thought and telescopes pierced the veil, the night sky was a map, not of space, but of meaning. In every culture, across every age, people saw intention in the heavens. Constellations became gods, frozen mid-battle, or lovers cast into eternal orbit. The moon was a mirror of fate, and the stars were the jewelry of creation. From ancient gods crafting the stars to sacred blueprints of the heavens, the idea of Universe design has long stirred the human mind. The Babylonians saw celestial order and concluded divine law. The Egyptians aligned their pyramids with Orion's belt, believing the afterlife flowed through starlight. The Greeks spun myths that tethered each heavenly body to gods, monsters, and moral lessons. Even in cultures oceans apart, the Mayans, the Chinese, the Hindus, the sky was never random. It was purposeful, deliberate, designed. But design, as imagined then, was steeped in mythology. It wasn't until the gears of science began to turn that the question evolved. In the silence, between orbits and in the measurements of shadows, a new way of knowing emerged. The medieval skies gave way to Renaissance curiosity, and with it came a revolution. Copernicus whispered that Earth was not the center. Galileo confirmed it. And suddenly, the universe was not ours alone. Still, even as Newton's laws began, to explain motion with mathematical certainty, the sense of design never fully vanished. Instead, it transformed. Order was no longer the work of deities, but of forces, unseen, impartial, beautiful. Gravity replaced gods, but the questions remained. Why should gravity work at all? Why should the cosmos be comprehensible? Why such elegant precision in its laws? The Enlightenment era gave rise to these tensions. Some thinkers imagined a clockwork universe, designed once, wound up, then left to tick eternally without intervention. A cosmic architect, distant and mute. Others rejected design altogether, favoring reason without mystery. But even then, the structure of the cosmos refused to feel accidental. Stars burned with reliable fury. Planets danced with clockmaker rhythm. The deeper one looked, the more patterns emerged. Not chaos. It is in this lineage that modern cosmology finds its roots. Einstein saw the universe not as a stage, but as a participant in its own drama, a fabric warped by mass and time. And yet, even in his equations, there was an aesthetic dimension. Beauty guided discovery. Symmetry offered clues. The cosmos, it seemed, wanted to be found, and found beautiful. Today, some scientists reflect on this ancient curiosity through the lens of the anthropic principle, which asks why the universe appears so precisely suited for life. It's not an answer so much as a mirror. It suggests that out of all possible universes, we exist in the one where conditions allow us to ask this very question. Because if they didn't, we wouldn't be here to notice. But that logic is both unsettling and elegant. It implies a kind of selection, not of purpose, but of survivorship. Still, it doesn't explain the how. Why do the laws of physics fall within such narrow bands of tolerance? Why should atoms form? Why should carbon be so versatile, water so stable, light so constant? The anthropic principle, especially in its stronger form, whispers of inevitability. That observers like us can only exist in a universe finely tuned for observation. But this principle does not prove design. It only accommodates it. It is a shadow where purpose might hide, or might not. Yet for all its philosophical nuance, the anthropic principle remains rooted in something very real. A universe that, by all accounts, seems rigged for emergence. The constants of nature, the speed of light, the charge of the electron, the ratio of strong to weak nuclear forces, are not arbitrary. Change them slightly, and reality collapses. Hydrogen cannot bond. Stars do not form. Life, in any imaginable form, becomes impossible. This fragility suggests something deeper. Not necessarily a designer in the classical sense, but a kind of constraint that feels, to the human mind, like intention. We find ourselves living in the slimmest of margins, a razor's edge where all existence teeters. And yet, here we are. The idea of universe design need not imply a builder with blueprints. It might instead suggest a cosmic necessity, that only in universes like ours does thought arise, and therefore only such universes are noticed at all. But that idea, too, is unsatisfying. It explains the that, but not the why. It describes, but does not illuminate. And so, from myth to mechanism, the human story has been one long attempt to trace the origin of order. From fiery chariots in the sky to gravitational waves, we have sought patterns, explanations, meaning. But what if the search itself is the point? What if the universe, whether designed or not, requires beings like us to complete it through curiosity? Consider the early universe, a seething cauldron of energy and chaos. Quarks danced and vanished. Time was barely born. Space barely defined. And yet, out of this tempest, structure emerged. Laws settled. Symmetries unfolded. In less than a second, the canvas of everything was stretched into being, not randomly, but with rules that would never change. That moment, the Big Bang, was not an explosion in space. It was the birth of space itself. And within it were encoded the values that would determine everything: how stars would form, how galaxies would spin, how life could one day ask about its own origin. Was this design? Or was it the only possibility that would ever be seen? From the first microsecond, the universe moved toward complexity. Inflation smoothed the wrinkles of chaos. Gravity gathered dust into stars. Fusion forged the elements of biology inside the hearts of suns. Planets coalesced, and on at least one of them, chemistry became memory. The story of origins is not just about physical processes. It's about improbability stacking upon improbability until consciousness emerges. It's about a cosmos that not only permits observers, but seems to beckon them. And yet, design remains a loaded word. It implies intent. It suggests a maker. But what if we thought of it differently? What if design is what we call patterns we do not yet understand? What if it's the name we give to the awe we feel when randomness gives way to rhythm? The ancient myths were not wrong, only premature. They saw intention where now we see interaction. They felt purpose where now we find probability. But the instinct that this all means something has not left us. It merely evolved. And as our knowledge expands, so too does our humility. We now know the universe is 13.8 billion years old, that it is expanding, not into space, but creating space as it goes. That galaxies are not static, but moving, each a swirl of billions of stars orbiting an unseen gravitational core. That the cosmic microwave background, the whisper of the Big Bang, still hums all around us. These are not facts alone. They are fragments of a larger truth, that the universe, far from indifferent, is intelligible, and intelligibility itself feels like a kind of invitation, a design of sorts, not etched in stone, but written in equations and echoing across time. So where did the universe come from? A quantum fluctuation? A multiversal branch? A divine command? We do not know. But the precision of its parameters suggests that randomness, if it is the source, is not the enemy of beauty. And beauty, if it is merely a byproduct of physics, remains no less astonishing. We live in a cosmos of balance, where light and darkness, matter and antimatter, expansion and gravity, all conspire to create not just a universe, but a home. And that home, this improbably stable cradle of stars and silence, still carries the fingerprints of its earliest moments. Whether those fingerprints belong to a designer or to the laws themselves is a question science may never fully answer. But the pursuit of that answer, across cultures, centuries, and telescopes, binds us to the stars. The origin of the universe is not just a scientific question. It is a human one. It touches on fear, on hope, on the deep-seated longing to know why anything exists at all. And in that longing, we glimpse something sacred. Not in the supernatural sense, but in the awe that grips us when we realize how rare it all is. We are the only species we know of that can contemplate its own beginnings, that can stare into the void and imagine meaning, that can ask, again and again, whether this was chance or choice. And so, the story continues. From ancient fires to particle accelerators, from whispered prayers to computer models of early inflation, from mythic sky battles to the delicate weave of cosmic filaments. In every age, we have searched for design, and in every age, we have found more mystery. Perhaps the greatest lesson of the universe's origin is this: that knowledge does not replace wonder. It deepens it, and if the universe was indeed designed, by laws, by necessity, by something beyond, then perhaps our role is not just to observe it, but to listen. For the universe may not speak in words, but in structure, in silence, in symmetry. It sings. Built to trace the fingerprints of creation, this mission aimed to probe the fabric of reality, down to the cosmological constants that shaped everything. It was no longer enough to simply observe the stars from afar. The questions had grown sharper, more urgent. What force balanced gravity so perfectly against expansion? Why do the fundamental constants, like the speed of light, the strength of the electromagnetic force, or the mass of the proton, seem so precisely dialed in? These were not idle curiosities anymore. They were coordinates in the map of existence itself, and so humanity set forth. Not in ships across oceans, but in machines that looked into the deep past. The journey began in silence, but not the silence of emptiness, the silence of preparation. Long before the first particle was smashed, before the first photons were captured, there was a vision that by building instruments vast and sensitive enough, we could reverse engineer the birth of time. Beneath mountains and in deserts, in space and in the coldest corners of Earth, we placed our questions in steel and silicon and waited for the universe to speak. In the Swiss-French countryside, buried deep underground, the Large Hadron Collider began its slow hum. It was not just a machine. It was a voyage into beginnings. Here, protons were accelerated to near light speed and smashed together, not to create destruction, but to peel back the layers of reality. What emerged were not mere particles, but echoes of forces that once ruled the infant cosmos. And in those echoes, we found clues. The Higgs field, the symmetry breaks, the hidden scaffolding of everything. Each discovery brought us closer to understanding the terms on which the universe allowed itself to exist. Meanwhile, orbiting hundreds of miles above the surface, the James Webb Space Telescope opened its golden eye. Its mission: to catch light, older than planets, older than stars, light that had traveled across billions of years to whisper secrets into our detectors. And as it listened, it heard the ancient harmonies of structure forming, of galaxies spinning into being, of cold dust collapsing into heat and memory. These weren't just images, they were postcards from the origin of time. What began as a whisper In the void evolved into the Big Bang Theory, now our cornerstone for how it all began. Not an explosion, but an expansion. A swelling of space itself from a singularity, or perhaps something even stranger. At first, the universe was smaller than an atom, denser than thought, hotter than imagination. Then, in a fraction of a second, it inflated, not into something, but into everything. The laws of physics froze into place like dew on cosmic glass. Time flowed, matter congealed, and the cosmological constants, the great regulators of reality, fell into alignment. These constants are not just numbers. They are the bones of the universe's body. They tell gravity how strong to pull, how much space should bend under, the weight of a star. They tell light how fast to move, how long to take to bring the past into our eyes. They decide how atoms form, how elements fuse, how stars ignite and die. A change in any one of them, even by the smallest fraction, would erase all we know. The universe would be sterile. Or worse, it would be nothing. And yet, they are what they are. Inexplicably, unerringly, perfectly. The scientific mission, then, is not just to measure them. It is to ask, why these values? Why this structure, this elegance, this improbability wrapped in inevitability? Could they have been different? Could there be other universes with different settings, where nothing exists, or where everything is unrecognizable? In chasing these questions, we reached farther. The Wilkinson microwave anisotropy probe, and later Planck, scanned the cosmic microwave background, the afterglow of creation. In those faint temperature differences, no wider than 1 part in 100,000, lay the fingerprints of everything. Tiny fluctuations in that early soup determined where galaxies would rise, where voids would deepen, where life might one day ask where it came from. These missions, telescopes, satellites, colliders, are not separate. They are chapters of one great story. Our attempt to catch the universe in the act of becoming, to see the scaffolding behind the stars. And every time we look deeper, the strangeness intensifies. We found dark energy, pushing galaxies apart with unseen hands. We mapped dark matter, holding cosmic structures together, though it refuses to reveal itself. We discovered that only about 5% of the universe is made of what we understand. The rest is mystery. But even in that darkness, there is design, patterns, consistencies, laws. The mission continues not only in machines but in minds. Theorists imagining dimensions beyond the visible, symmetries beyond intuition. Some propose a multiverse, a cosmic foam of universes bubbling into being, each with different constants. In this view, we inhabit one tiny bubble where the dials happen to align. Others look for a deeper law, a meta-principle that demands things be this way. A rule behind the rules. Whatever the answer, we know this. The cosmos invites inquiry. It is not silent by accident. It is structured in such a way that curiosity is rewarded, that truth unfolds layer by layer. And this mission, this great collective reach, is not just about understanding the beginning. It is about understanding what the beginning implies about now, about us, because to study cosmological constants is to study the conditions for meaning. To chase the Big Bang is to chase the moment everything could happen. And the closer we get, the more we realize that we are not separate from this story. We are its latest expression. The carbon in our bones was forged in ancient stars. The iron in our blood was born in supernovae. We are not outside observers. We are experiments, still running. We are the mission's echo. Even our questions carry memory. Every model we build, every simulation we run, holds assumptions baked into the shape of our experience. But the universe is under no obligation to make sense. It simply does. And that miracle, that logic is even possible, is itself part of what we seek to explain. In this vast endeavor, humility is our compass. The deeper we dig, the more we find we do not know. But we do not stop, because beneath every answer lies another paradox, another doorway. And so, the mission continues. In the rumble of colliders, in the silence of telescopes, in the minds of children staring at the stars for the first time. We are all participating in this long, careful unweaving of mystery. We are the witnesses of fire frozen into law, of chaos made predictable, of silence singing through equations. The mission is not just to know. It is to feel what knowing means. To realize that even the smallest number, the cosmological constant L, carries with it the possibility of everything. The universe began as a breath. Our mission is to listen. It began with a glitch, or so they thought. A margin too tight, a result too precise. In the early morning hours, data streamed in from a remote sensor aboard a deep space observatory. The numbers didn't just align, they dazzled. It was as if the universe was too perfect for life to be mere coincidence. What was meant to be routine, the mapping of distant starlight, the calibration of thermal fluctuations, suddenly turned into a whisper from the edge of reason. And in that whisper, a truth shimmered. Something was off, or perhaps something was too right. They checked the machines, cross-referenced algorithms, scrubbed the data. But it was all intact, uncorrupted, unspoiled, unreasonably consistent. The radiation signature from a galaxy 12 billion light-years away matched theoretical predictions to a degree no one expected. Not approximated, matched, down to the last decimal. It was, for lack of a better word, beautiful. But beauty in science is a strange thing. It raises suspicion. Nature, while often orderly, is rarely that obliging. The idea that fundamental structures in the early universe would echo our deepest calculations without deviation felt less like randomness and more like resonance. The scientists were silent for a moment longer than usual. And silence, in this field, speaks volumes. What they had stumbled upon wasn't just a data point. It was a crack in the wall of probability. The expansion rate of that ancient galaxy, the way light bent around its mass, the energy signature of its surrounding halo, it all suggested a profound calibration of initial conditions. Not just for that galaxy, but for everything. The constants that governed it were the same as ours, despite the billions of years and endless light years separating us. As if the entire cosmos had been painted with the same invisible brush. It confirmed a suspicion that had long simmered in the background, that the universe is too perfect for life to be an accident. Not perfect in the sense of flawlessness, but in the quiet, unnerving sense of intention. The way a lock is perfect for a key, or a key perfect for a lock. Every law, every particle, every ratio precisely choreographed to allow complexity to arise, for consciousness to blink open its eyes and ask why. Yet to understand why, one must first step into the realm where reality loses its footing, the world of the very small, of the deeply unpredictable. Hidden within quantum fields and particle probabilities lies the strange harmony of the quantum physics and universe connection, a world where particles exist in states of maybe, where observation changes outcome, where uncertainty isn't a flaw, but a feature. It is here, in the heart of quantum physics, that the architecture of the universe begins. Virtual particles popping into and out of existence, borrowing energy from the vacuum itself. Fields oscillating with possibility, shaping space-time with their tremors. At this level, the universe isn't solid. It's a song of probabilities. And that song has rhythm. The anomaly they discovered revealed a quantum echo, a pattern in the background noise of the universe that shouldn't have been there. The Planck spectrum, usually smooth, carried a ripple, small but distinct, a subtle upturn where none should be. When modeled backward through simulations, that ripple corresponded to a fluctuation in the early inflationary period, a twitch in the vacuum that seeded structure with more precision than expected. It meant that from the very first instance, the universe was not only expanding, it was crafting. Quantum mechanics predicts fluctuation. It embraces randomness. But this ripple was patterned, structured. As if beneath the dice roll of quantum fields, something had quietly imposed a rhythm. That rhythm echoed through time, through gravity wells and hydrogen clouds, through supernovae and cell membranes, through us. What startled the scientists wasn't just that the data matched theory, it was that the theory began to feel like destiny, as though the universe had no choice but to create observers, as though consciousness was an outcome embedded in the quantum fabric from the very beginning. Some called it anthropic selection, the idea that only in such a universe could beings exist to notice. But others weren't satisfied. This wasn't just survivorship bias. It was more than coincidence. It was choreography. The findings were published, peer-reviewed, challenged and defended, yet no one could fully dismiss the implications. Something about the universe's early behavior, its quantum blueprint, bore a signature of exactitude that begged for explanation. It was not proof of a designer, but it was a challenge to the notion that everything was just random chance. It was as though the quantum dice had been loaded, not to guarantee a specific outcome, but to ensure possibility. Life, then, was not a fluke. It was a crescendo waiting to happen. This is what the discovery did. It transformed wonder into precision. It took the poetry of existence and etched it in numbers. And in those numbers, something ancient stirred. A feeling that maybe, just maybe, the universe had been waiting for us all along. They dug deeper. What else in the quantum fields had been overlooked? What other harmonies had been misread as noise? As quantum computing evolved, simulations grew more intricate. The wave function collapse, once thought to be random, showed subtle biases when applied to certain cosmological contexts. Some theorized a kind of entanglement between the early universe and the present. That time itself was not entirely linear, but woven like a tapestry, with threads tugging across epochs. And if that were true, then our present-day measurements, our questions, were part of the story from the beginning. In some strange quantum sense, we were always meant to ask. The implications were dizzying. If consciousness emerges from quantum patterns, and those patterns are written into the birth of space-time, then perhaps the universe doesn't just allow life. Perhaps it requires it. Perhaps the observer is not a visitor to the cosmos, but a co-author. Of course, not everyone agreed. Many warned of anthropocentrism, the danger of placing ourselves too close to the center. But others pointed to the data and whispered, what if the center is not a place, but a role? If the universe is too perfect for life to be accidental, and if quantum mechanics reveals a deeper order beneath its chaos, then maybe, just maybe, we are not anomalies. We are inevitabilities. probabilistic petals on a flower of constants. But the mystery deepened further still. New data suggested quantum entanglement on a cosmic scale. Photons separated by billions of years showed correlations that defied explanation. It was as if the universe remembered itself, not just in matter and energy, but in information. The universe, some began to argue, is not a machine. It is not a collection of things. It is a process of knowing, a computation unfolding through time where particles are logic gates, galaxies are memory, and we, the conscious, the curious, are the self-reflective loops in the code. The Adi first discovery was not an answer. It was a threshold. It was the moment the cosmos blinked back, and in that blink was everything, from the rise of stars to the breath in our lungs, from quanta, that dance in superposition, to the unspoken awe in the face of a night sky. The discovery did not make us smaller. It did not place us above nature. It reminded us that we are nature, rare, impossible, and precisely as we must be. The ripple in the data was not noise. It was a whisper, a signal from the beginning that said, "You were always part of the equation." And the question it left us with, vibrating at the edge of our understanding, was this: if the universe is a song, what part are we meant to sing? The discovery should have brought clarity. Instead, it opened 1,000 doors, each leading into deeper fog. For a brief moment, it felt like we had grasped something essential, something central to the design of everything. But the closer we looked, the more that design began to fracture into possibilities. Patterns once thought sacred began to look like shadows of something larger, or smaller, or not meant for us to understand at all. In that space between certainty and wonder, a question rose like static in the background radiation. Was it all just a cosmic coincidence? Or could there be infinite universes, each with different laws? What appeared as perfection might not be intentional after all. It might be the illusion that emerges when one outcome is visible among countless others forever hidden. This was the beginning of a schism in thought, a philosophical rift not about data, but about interpretation. The laws of nature hadn't changed, but the story we told ourselves about them had. One camp turned toward the elegant madness of multiverse theory, suggesting our universe is just one of many rolled by the dice of reality. Each universe in this grand ensemble would have its own cosmological constants, its own rules, its own possibilities, or lack thereof. In most, perhaps, matter never formed. In some, stars collapsed before they could burn. In others still, time itself may have folded inward, creating dimensions unrecognizable to anything like us. But in this one, in ours, the conditions were just right. Not perfect, perhaps, but sufficient, balanced, alive. To the proponents of the multiverse, our sense of improbability was the result of selective blindness. Of course, it all looks tailored. We are looking from the only perch where such tailoring makes life possible. In a field of trillions of universes, some flower and some fall, we inhabit a blossom, but others resisted. They called this reasoning hollow, an escape hatch rather than an answer. It replaced explanation with statistics, turned the awe of discovery into a game of chances. The multiverse, they said, was untestable, a speculation bordering on metaphysics. Without a way to observe these alternate realms, how could we call them science? And yet, the math did not go away. String theory, eternal inflation, quantum decoherence, they all hinted, in different dialects, at multiplicity. That maybe the Big Bang was not singular, but local. That beyond our bubble of space-time, Countless others expand, contract, or stagnate. Not a universe, but a megaverse. Not a cosmos, but a landscape of realities, each stitched from different threads. In this new vision, our universe was not designed like a watch, but selected like a lottery winner. The cosmic coincidence of life-friendly constants was not improbable. It was inevitable somewhere, and that somewhere happened to be here. Still, the idea rattled. It dissolved the uniqueness of everything we thought sacred. If there are infinite versions of reality, then perhaps there are infinite versions of us, each living slightly altered lives, making different choices, existing under stars colored by different physical truths. It meant that meaning itself might be local, an emergent property, not a universal one. But the mystery deepened. Some patterns in the cosmic microwave background, the relic light of creation, didn't quite match the standard model. Small cold spots, tiny anomalies. Some theorists speculated these might be bruises from neighboring universes, gravitational interactions from dimensions beyond our own, subtle imprints left where our cosmos brushed against another in the early moments of inflation. If true, these weren't just curiosities. They were fingerprints from beyond the veil. And so the mission changed, from mapping what is to searching for signs of what might be. Telescopes were recalibrated, simulations adjusted. Particle accelerators began probing deeper into energies thought inaccessible, seeking hints of extra dimensions, of symmetry breaks, of particles that shouldn't exist. But every answer only spun more questions. Could quantum fluctuations, those unpredictable stirrings of the vacuum, actually seed entire universes? Was each decision of a particle not just a choice in this world, but a branching into another? Were we, right now, splitting into infinite paths, infinite versions of ourselves rippling through parallel histories? The implications were as dizzying as they were divisive. If every possibility happens somewhere, what does it mean to choose? If every version of reality exists, what becomes of purpose, of consequence? And yet, something persisted. In the heart of this unraveling mystery was not despair, but curiosity. The same force that pulled Galileo to the stars, that pushed Einstein through the fabric of space-time, now asked us to see reality not as a line, but as a web, not as a book, but as a library. Even in opposition, scientists shared a strange reverence. For whether the universe was one or many, it remained astonishing that we could even ask. That human minds, sculpted by stardust, could reach into the void and find reflections staring back. The unraveling wasn't failure. It was growth, a peeling away of assumptions, an invitation to a deeper, stranger truth. And still, among the most poetic questions remained. If we are one of many, why does this one feel so much like home? Because this universe, with its blue skies and golden ratios, its fusion-born elements and carbon-based dreams, is where we learned to wonder, where we built telescopes and sang to the stars, where we buried the dead and studied the living, where we named love and fear and time. If there are other universes, perhaps they too have their poets, their thinkers, their dreamers, or perhaps not. Perhaps only here did the chaos quiet long enough for thought to echo. Cosmic coincidence or inevitable consequence, we do not know. But we know this. In chasing the mystery, in letting it unravel rather than collapse, we honor the very forces that made us. Curiosity, doubt, awe. The unraveling is not the end of the story. It is the part where the story becomes real. where wonder deepens into wisdom. And if, in the end, we find ourselves part of a multiverse, a flicker in a sea of infinite stars, it does not make this universe smaller. It makes it sacred. In the stillness between discovery and understanding, a deeper question stirs. Not of what the universe is, but what it means. We've charted galaxies, weighed black holes, unraveled the origins of atoms, and probed the silence before time itself. Yet, through it all, one mystery continues to haunt the edge of every equation. Ourselves, consciousness, that quiet, persistent awareness glowing behind every thought, remains unquantified, unpredicted, and yet utterly undeniable. And so, the question now folds inward. Could it be that the universe and consciousness are entangled in ways we've only begun to understand? We gaze outward, and we map stars. We gaze inward, and we encounter the observer. At the heart of physics is the act of measurement. And at the heart of measurement is a mind, a presence capable of asking, testing, interpreting. Is this an accident of biology, a side effect of neurons arranged just so? Or is it something more? Could the presence of awareness be as fundamental to the universe as mass, energy, or charge? It's a life-supporting universe, yes, but one that may be reflecting back the very minds that observe it. We do not merely record reality, we participate in its unfolding. When we measure, particles collapse. When we observe, probabilities resolve. The strange laws of quantum mechanics do not describe a passive world, but a responsive one. A cosmos that in some deep way waits for the question before revealing the answer. Some scientists dismiss this as interpretation. Others see it as a crack in the wall, a suggestion that the universe is not complete without the observer. And if that's true, then life, far from being a random byproduct, is a necessary thread in the cosmic fabric. Not because we are special, but because the act of perceiving is part of what makes the universe real. But how do we reconcile this with scale? How can something so vast, galaxies, dark energy, the curvature of space-time, be connected to something so small, so fragile as a human mind? The answer may lie not in size, but in structure. The brain is not the largest system in the universe. But it may be the most complex. 86 billion neurons, firing in patterns more intricate than any galaxy. A symphony of electrochemical whispers giving rise to thought, memory, emotion. And somehow, within this web of flesh and fire, emerges a sense of self. A feeling of I am. This sense, the one reading these words, the one asking what it all means, is not separate from the universe. It is the universe, contemplating itself. Matter that has become reflective. Starlight remembering its origin. Could it be, then, that consciousness is not a glitch in the system, but a feature of it? That the same laws that birthed stars, inevitably, led to sentience? That from hydrogen and gravity, the long arc of time would eventually bend toward minds capable of wonder? There are those who argue that consciousness must be emergent, a product of complexity. But even if that is true, it doesn't explain why the universe allows complexity at all, why it forms stable atoms, why chemistry stacks into biology, why, at every level, reality seems to lean toward structure, not chaos. It is as if the cosmos has a bias toward organization, a quiet insistence that things connect, cohere, coalesce. And in that connecting, life arises. And with life, awareness. And with awareness, meaning. We are not just products of the universe. We are participants in its story. not separate, but continuous. And in the deep parallels between mind and cosmos, the fractal patterns of neurons and galaxies, the pulses of thought and quasar, we glimpse a strange symmetry. Some traditions have long whispered this truth, that the outer world and the inner are reflections of one another, that to understand the cosmos, one must understand the self, and to understand the self is to mirror the stars. Modern science is catching up. Studies on panpsychism suggest that perhaps consciousness is not binary, not an on-off switch, but a spectrum. Perhaps it is woven into the universe itself, like spin or charge. Perhaps every particle carries a sliver of awareness, not like a mind, but like a murmur. And as particles bind into atoms, into molecules, into brains, that murmur crescendos, into the roar of thought. If this is true, then the universe is not lifeless space punctuated by accidents of life. It is a continuum of awareness, rising, falling, folding upon itself. This does not negate biology. It does not deny evolution, or the brain's role in cognition. It simply asks, what if the canvas upon which biology paints is already awake? More provocatively, what if the laws of the universe are tuned not just for life, but for experience? Consider again the strange fact that the universe can be known at all. That the language of mathematics, invented by apes on a rock, maps cleanly onto the structure of the cosmos. That black holes obey thermodynamic laws. That entropy behaves like memory. That the speed of light serves as both a physical limit and an informational boundary. This harmony is not proof of purpose, but it is peculiar. It suggests not just a universe that works, but one that speaks, if we know how to listen. In this view, consciousness is not a candle flickering against the dark. It is the dark, learning to light itself. A recursive loop, a cosmic connection, a feedback between the knower and the known. When we look at the night sky, we are not looking at something foreign. We are looking at history, at lineage, at the ancestors of our atoms. And in that gaze, something ancient reawakens, a memory not of place, but of origin. The photons striking your retina tonight began their journey millions, sometimes billions, of years ago. They streamed from stars that no longer exist, and yet here they are, finishing their journey in the soft tissue of your eye, translated into electrical impulse, becoming image, becoming feeling. This is not metaphor. This is physics. This is connection. The universe is vast, cold, dangerous, but it is also intelligible, and perhaps, in the deepest sense, familiar. Maybe the universe and consciousness are not separate realms, but two sides of the same coin, the objective and the subjective, folding inward and outward in an endless rhythm. In this rhythm, perhaps meaning is not imposed from outside nor invented from within. Perhaps it emerges, like life itself, from the interplay between awareness and the world it beholds. And so the mystery deepens, not with despair, but with reverence. For in the end, it may not matter whether the universe was made for us or we for it. What matters is that we are here, that we can see, that we can wonder. And in that wonder, something stirs in the silence. A signal, perhaps, from the universe itself. You are not alone. You were never separate. You are the question, and the answer, the observer and the observed. You are the echo of starlight, remembering. For most of the journey, the universe appeared sincere, an open manuscript of matter and meaning, unfolding across eons with poetic precision. We traced its birth in radiation, its breath in gravity, its thoughts in stars. We saw in it a sculptor's touch, a mathematician's elegance, a storyteller's rhythm. Every law, every constant, every curve of space and tick of time seemed improbably perfect, stitched together with an almost reverent symmetry. The deeper we looked, the more it felt designed, not necessarily by a divine mind, but by something deliberate, elegant, coherent. And then the whisper came, not from deep space, not from ancient starlight, but from within our own calculations, from the very language we used to decode the cosmos. Somewhere in the endless zeros and ones, a new question emerged, first quietly, then boldly, unsettlingly. What if the structure we praise for its perfection isn't natural at all? What if the universe is a simulation? At first, the idea was treated like speculative philosophy, a modern form of digital solipsism, provocative but unserious, a thought experiment best left in late-night dorm rooms and science fiction films. But then, the anomalies began to stack. Patterns that didn't quite belong, constraints too clean to be organic, puzzles that no longer made sense as physics, but started to make too much sense as code. Some point to strange mathematical regularities as evidence for the universe being a simulation, digital seams in the cosmic fabric. The fine structure constant, for example, is a dimensionless number that governs the strength of electromagnetic interaction. No one knows why it has the value it does. Change it slightly, and atoms dissolve. Leave it unchanged, and everything works exactly. Too exactly, some would say. And then there are the quantized units of space and time. Planck length, Planck time. The smallest possible slices of the universe. Below these scales, physics simply stops making sense, as if reality itself is pixelated. A resolution limit, hard-coded into existence. In every other context, we recognize that behavior. It's how digital rendering works. Could the universe, then, be running on a substrate we cannot see? Could all of reality be an emergent phenomenon, a simulation nested within something else? Not just metaphorically, but literally? The twist wasn't just that this theory existed. It was that serious. Physicists, computer scientists, and philosophers began to take it seriously. Nick Bostrom, a philosopher at Oxford, formalized the idea into a trilemma. Either civilizations never reach the technological maturity to simulate universes, or they choose not to, or we are almost certainly living in a simulation already. Statistically, he argued, if it's possible to simulate a conscious universe, then there would be many such simulations, and only one base reality. The odds that we inhabit the real one? Astronomically low. Still, what would evidence for simulation even look like? Some propose glitches, breaks in the pattern, sudden anomalies in physical law. Others suggest that the speed of light is not a universal constant, but a rendering limit, like the frame rate of a video game, a speed cap set by the simulation's underlying architecture. Some even hypothesize that quantum indeterminacy, the bizarre behavior of particles observed in multiple states, makes more sense if the universe only renders reality when observed, like conserving computational resources. Could the probabilistic haze of quantum physics actually be lazy rendering? And what about the uniformity of cosmic background radiation? The inexplicably smooth temperature distribution across vast regions of space? Regions that could not have communicated with each other in the early universe due to the speed of light? Inflation theory tries to explain it, but the simulation hypothesis offers a simpler possibility. It was initialized that way. Suddenly, everything becomes suspect. Gravity might not be a force, but an emergent property, a side effect of information interacting on a holographic surface. Time, instead of being fundamental, could be an illusion, a variable in the code, adjusted frame by frame. Even consciousness might not be native to biology, but a pattern complex enough to appear inside an artificial structure. This isn't merely philosophical vertigo, it's an ontological earthquake. Because if the universe is a simulation, then all our previous frameworks about purpose, existence, even physics itself, are surface-level illusions. The constants aren't fine-tuned because they are lucky. They're fine-tuned because someone, or something, set them. But who? And why? We reach again for old metaphors: the programmer, the architect, the god behind the curtain. But these names are placeholders, flickers of intuition dancing in the dark. Perhaps it's not even a who, but a what. Perhaps we are the product of natural selection, not of genes, but of simulations. In a multiverse of digital constructs, only those simulations that generate stable, self-aware patterns persist. And we? We are that pattern. It's a terrifyingly beautiful idea. Because it doesn't negate wonder. It recasts it. If the stars are code, they're still majestic. If atoms are logic gates, they're still miraculous. If time is a line of instructions, it still flows like poetry. But there is fear, too. Because if the universe is a simulation, what happens if it ends? If we are running on borrowed computation, could we be paused, terminated, rewritten? Or are we sandboxed, free within a set of rules, but never truly autonomous? Perhaps, more urgently, are we meant to know? Because all of this, the discoveries, the precision, the unfolding awareness, might itself be a test, an experiment to see how far simulated minds can go, how deep they can peer before they touch the walls of their reality. And here's the final twist. Even knowing it's a simulation might change nothing. The laws would still work. The stars would still burn. Love would still bloom. Pain would still cut. Meaning would still matter. Because within the illusion, we are real. Within the simulation, we still feel. So we return to the question, not with answers, but with new awe. Is the universe a simulation? Maybe. Maybe not. But the very possibility reminds us how little we understand, and how vast the unknown remains. Whether we are coded or carbon, designed or emergent, it changes nothing about the beauty of being here, of thinking, of asking, of wondering. And perhaps that is the point. Perhaps the truest signature of a simulated universe is that it allows its characters to suspect the stage, to become aware, not just of their world, but of their being. It was there all along. We just didn't know how to look. The discoveries behind us now glimmer like stars in a rearview mirror, each chapter building toward an overwhelming realization. This universe, for all its scale and silence, is not indifferent. It is precise, responsive, and, at times, uncomfortably aware. We've uncovered constants so exact they verge on sacred, patterns so elegant they feel intentional, and questions so unanswerable they echo through the corridors of both science and soul. But where does that leave us? This fragile species, walking upright on a cooling planet, thinking thoughts too large for its skull. Physicists ask, can the universe exist with different physical laws? And what would such universes mean for our fate? Would life still emerge if gravity pulled a fraction harder, if protons decayed faster, If light didn't move as it does now? The answer, in most simulations and models, is no. Life, at least life as we understand it, appears precariously, perched on a ledge so narrow that almost any alteration leads to silence. A sterile cosmos, an unlit stage. This precariousness has implications not just for science, but for our identity. We've long imagined ourselves as accidental, the result of chance, time, and chemistry. But the deeper we dig, the less convincing that story becomes. This isn't just a universe that permits life, it's one that insists on it. And if that is true, then perhaps we must finally consider what life, what consciousness, means to the universe itself. Here, the questions shift. They no longer sit neatly inside equations or telescopic observations. They wander into the blurred terrain of values, ethics, metaphysics. The deeper we search, the more blurred the lines become in the age-old debate of science versus philosophy about the universe. What began as observation becomes contemplation. What started as hypothesis becomes parable. And in that blur lies the future of humanity. If the universe is this finely tuned, then the emergence of intelligent observers is not a footnote. It's the climax. And if consciousness is not a fluke but a feature, something the universe wants to happen, then we, as its stewards, carry responsibilities we've barely begun to fathom. We are the only species, as far as we know, that builds telescopes to find its own beginning, that accelerates particles to crack open reality, that writes poetry about quantum fields. If the universe is a mirror, then we are its eyes. If it's a simulation, then we are the anomaly it waits to observe. Either way, we are not passive, we are participants, co-authors. And what we do, how we live, create, destroy, echoes back into the framework from which we arose. This means more than survival. It means stewardship. The carbon in our lungs once swirled in dying stars. The calcium in our bones is the ash of ancient supernovae. We are not separate from the cosmos. We are cosmic memory. And as memory, we have the power to shape what comes next. If other universes can exist with different laws, then this one, ours, might be rare beyond measure, a jewel in the dark. And if that's true, then Earth is not just another rock. It's a node in something vast and sacred, a crucible of meaning in a void of potential. So what do we owe this place? We owe it reverence, curiosity, patience. We owe it stories, because stories are how consciousness processes itself. We owe it science, because science is how the cosmos learns about its own mechanics. And we owe it kindness, because kindness, strangely enough, may be the most rational survival strategy in a universe where connection is everything. The implications for our future stretch far beyond science. They touch education, politics, religion, culture. If we are part of a finely balanced equation, then our ignorance has weight. Our wars, our pollution, our exploitation, they are not local errors. They ripple. They contradict the very harmony that sustains us. We talk often about colonizing other worlds, about expanding into the stars. But the question is no longer just, can we? It is, should we? What is the ethical obligation of a conscious species in a conscious universe? If life is rare, do we have the right to spread it like fire? Or must we first learn to protect what we already hold? Science fiction dreams of futures filled with AI, terraforming, galactic travel. But perhaps the most radical future is the one where we understand, where we stop building faster engines long enough to ask what direction we should be going, Because if consciousness is the universe becoming self-aware, then each act of violence is a blow to that awareness. Each unchecked greed a cancer in the EE code. To know this, to truly know it, is to be changed. It is to look at a forest and see algorithms of balance, to hear a heartbeat and understand it as a harmonic echo of gravitational dance, to see another person and know that their mind, like yours, is stitched from particles born in stars that no longer shine. This is what the discoveries demand of us. Not certainty, but humility. Not conquest, but care. We must teach our children not just facts about the universe, but reverence for its strangeness. Not just how it works, but how it feels. We must rebuild institutions not only on data, but on awe. Not only on logic, but on meaning. This is the bridge between science and philosophy. Not one defeating the other, but both walking into the future together. Because the truth is, physics alone cannot answer why the universe exists, any more than love can be measured in joules. But both are real, both are necessary, and both define what it means to be human in a cosmos like this. So what, then, is our task? It is to learn, to explore, to remember that every particle we observe once danced in the dark, waiting to become part of a mind. It is to protect life, not just ours, but all forms, because life is the rarest phenomenon we know. It is to extend compassion, not because of religion or law, but because the structure of the universe implies connection. It is to act as though our thoughts matter, because perhaps they do. Perhaps each time we ask a new question, a new corner of the cosmos unfolds. Perhaps each act of kindness echoes beyond this world. Perhaps the meaning of life is not to find meaning, but to generate it. Again and again, like stars igniting in the void. We may never know if other universes exist with different physical laws. We may never resolve the battle of science versus philosophy. But we do know this. We are here. And in that simple, staggering fact lies the greatest responsibility of all, to be worthy of the cosmos that made us. Maybe it all began with silence, a universe from nothing, bursting into being for reasons we may never fully grasp. A silence so total, so infinite that even time had no name, and space no shape. From this void, not a place, but the absence of all places, a spark ignited. Not a flame, not a sound, but an unfolding. A bloom of being from the raw possibility of non-existence. Energy flared, laws formed, space stretched like a breath held too long, and from that breath came stars, galaxies, life, and wonder. This origin, this birth from nothing, defies our instincts. For how can something come from nothing? How can the whole of existence unroll from a point that was never a point, that had no before? But perhaps nothing is only a word for limits we have not yet surpassed. Perhaps beneath that nothing lay a principle, not of matter or form, but of becoming. The capacity for the real to emerge from the unreal, the eternal paradox. And perhaps, too, it is in this paradox that perfection hides. We often speak of the universe as perfect, a machine of exact gears, a web of flawless tension. But is that perfection real? Or is it reflection? We marvel at how the constants align, how the elements obey, how complexity blooms from chaos. Yet even as we celebrate this harmony, cracks remain. Black holes devour knowledge. Quantum particles behave like riddles. Time flows forward, even though physics whispers it need not. And so the universe stands as both masterwork and mystery, complete yet unfinished. In the end, the cosmos may be a mirror of the questions we ask, framed by our philosophical arguments about universe perfection. We look outward and find meaning because we are meaning-seeking creatures. We discover elegance because our minds are built to notice pattern. Does that mean the perfection is real? Or are we simply tuned to see it, like eyes that evolved to love light? Perhaps it doesn't matter, because the experience of seeing, wondering, reaching is itself real. And in that experience, the universe becomes more than stars and laws. It becomes story. We are not the first to tell it. Long before telescopes, before mathematics and molecules, our ancestors looked at the night sky and felt the echo of this same awe. They saw gods in Orion, omens in eclipses, love and loss in the shifting of the moon. Their myths were crude by today's standards, but not their yearning. That was pure. That was eternal. And now, thousands of years later, we continue the tale with better tools but the same trembling voice. We measure redshifts. We chart microwave backgrounds. We simulate universes in silico. Yet beneath the equations, the awe remains, unchanged, unyielding. This is the poetic arc of humanity, not to conquer the stars, but to recognize ourselves in them. For what is a galaxy, if not a spiral echo of our own fingerprints? What is a supernova, if not the violent birth of everything we are? The iron in our blood, the calcium in our bones, the oxygen we breathe, all forged in stars that died with dignity. We are their eulogy, their continuation. From the edge of creation to the neurons that spark when we gaze at its remnants, the story remains singular. This universe knows itself, in part, through us. Yet we are transient, fleeting. The earth will one day vanish. The sun will swell and swallow. The galaxies will drift too far to see. Entropy will spread like sleep over all that is. And one day, if the physicists are right, not even memory will remain. Still, what a miracle that we were here. What a miracle that atoms learned to think, to feel, to care. That in a brief flicker of cosmic time, the universe became conscious enough to ask, why? Maybe we were not meant to find a final answer. Maybe the question is the point. The reaching, the trying, the fall and rise of thought. Maybe it was never about the destination, only the act of looking up. We return now to where we began, the perfection that felt too sharp, too precise. The mystery of fine-tuned constants, of physics that sings in harmony. Was it design? Coincidence? The default state of possibility itself? There is elegance in every theory, beauty in every doubt, and, perhaps, in the absence of certainty, we are invited to create our own meanings, not to impose upon the universe, but to reflect what it already whispers, to love, to question, to build and destroy and build again, to laugh beneath stars, to mourn when stars go dark, to be here, now, in the breath between birth and oblivion. If the universe came from nothing, then even our smallest joys are defiant. Even pain becomes precious. Even silence is holy. We end, as all stories must, not with an answer, but with a turning, a glance toward the night. A final echo. The universe is not a puzzle to be solved, but a poem to be read aloud. One stanza at a time. by countless voices across space and time. And if we are part of its verse, then let our lines be worthy. Let them wonder. Let them burn.